I spent $1,461.48 on Major League Baseball game tickets this season, and let's figure out how I did it.
Let's go.
My now wife and I started the season on an opening day trip, making our way from my hometown to Baltimore to watch their first game of the season versus the Angels. It was our first opening day, and the general consensus was that the ceremony was a little bit long winded. There were some nice bits, including the support for the Scott Francis Key Bridge collapse and the introduction of both teams, but in general, for someone who wasn't a fan of either team, I wouldn't suggest making sure you're there for the ceremony past that first time experience like ours. The game itself was the definition of an Angels game. Mike Trout opened the scoring in the first inning with a solo homer, where my wife snagged this picture just a split second after the home run. Then the Orioles regained the lead in the bottom of the first, tacked on 3 more runs in the bottom of the second, and from there it was pretty much smooth sailing. Corbin Burns was electric in his Orioles debut, pitching 6 innings with 11 strikeouts and just the 1 run. As for the game itself, the early onset blowout did mean that the atmosphere did become a little lackluster towards the middle and end, and the cold and rain left a poor taste in our mouths. Overall, it was a pretty solid experience, but not something I would be dying to return to. At this point, it would have slotted nicely into that second spot for my favorite stadiums, as the others were Pittsburgh, who will be my permanent number one, and the Rays and Reds, who were fairly disappointing when we visited. As for costs, the tickets were $336.60 after taxes and fees and all that fun stuff, which would be a number we would quickly rise 2 days later. During the day in between on March 29th, we took a relaxation day to visit the Smithsonian Zoo in DC. The traffic and parking were outrageous, but aside from that, it was a day well spent considering the trip we would have to take the next day from our hotel to the ruckus Philadelphia. We started the day in Philadelphia as any good couple should, walking the Rocky Steps and viewing his statue from afar, considering the line was stupidly long. After that, we made our way into the stadium and enjoyed the atmosphere. I spent weeks telling Kylie about how the crowd is just generally different and how they support their players, and that did not disappoint. After walking through the tailgates galore, we made it to the stadium and got to see Philly legends Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox throw out the first pitch of the game, which of course made the crowd erupt. The excitement was short-lived as the Braves opened the game with Ozzie Albies hitting a 2-run homer to take the lead. Philly bounced back in the bottom of the first, grabbing 3 runs, headlined by a 2-run single by Bryson Stott, and it seemed like we were in for a great back-and-forth game. That was until the Braves tacked on 3 runs in the top of the second, 2 more in the top of the third, and finally 4 runs in the top of the sixth to put the game to bed. Naturally, we got to hear the Philly boos, and we were on our way back to the hotel. Through the first inning, Philadelphia had delivered on being the most exciting non-Pittsburgh atmosphere my wife and I experienced. The tailgating, the rowdy fans, the atmosphere, and even the first inning were on pace for me to have to question my placing of the sentimental PNC Park. Unfortunately, the game from the second inning onward did leave a bit of a sour taste, and it mentally allowed me to hold Pittsburgh in its place, but Philly forced its way into the second spot on my personal list. For cost, the total was $297.68 for the 2 tickets, bringing the total up to this point in the season to $634.28 on the season, but that wouldn't last long as we still had 2 days left on our trip. However, with the extra time, we spent the 4th day visiting all the monuments and wonders in DC. It was pretty cool to rectify an old field trip from school, and as a history buff, it is easy for me to say I could spend much more time than we did scouring the National Mall. However, after 6.4 miles of walking, that was enough for us, and we hit a bit of a respite before our final day where we visited Nationals Park. This was our first opportunity of the year to watch the Pirates, and they started out hot, grabbing 2 runs in the top of the second. However, as the game wore on, the Nationals were able to fight back into the game, mainly off a 2-run homer from CJ Abrams in the bottom of the 7th off Roansy Contreras. However, the Pirates were able to quickly fight back with 3 runs in the top of the 8th and 2 more in the 9th to effectively put the game away. The stadium was pretty neat. We got to see the Budweiser horses, the food was solid, and a lot of the fans we ran into were really nice, which would allow the stadium to slot nicely into the 4th slot out of the 6 stadiums we visited. Everything was great, but the atmosphere felt much more like a small market team with limited fans during the middle of the season, as opposed to a team having its home opener, especially one that made a comeback late into the game to tie it. So for that, it ended up more in the middle of the pack for me. Cost-wise, this hit our bank accounts with a $260.06 price tag and brought our total on the year for tickets to $894.34. Certainly a hefty amount for 3 games in 5 days, but it is a set of experience that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world as a cool trip with my now wife. Then we spent a couple months out of baseball games before we could make the trip to Atlanta with my mother. Our first day in Atlanta was pretty straightforward, visiting the Pirates versus Brave game on June 28th. Coming into the game, it was easy for me to be pessimistic with Martin Perez on the mound and a scuffling Pirates team versus the loaded Braves lineup. And it went pretty much as expected, with the Pirates giving up 6 runs early and pretty much ending the game there. Unfortunately, the game did lose a bit of its luster, not only as a Pirates fan, but the whole stadium in general. But like Philadelphia, up to that point, it was an electric atmosphere. They had Ashley Cook performing before the game. The crowd was amazing. The stadium was pretty neat, which landed it as the third best stadium out of our list of 7, leading the final list of visited stadiums as a couple as Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Baltimore, DC, Tampa Bay, and Cincinnati. For the rest of the weekend, we spent time at the Georgia Aquarium and the World of Coca-Cola, which was a great time, but it was just overly busy. That trip concluded on Sunday, June 30th, and was the last game my wife and I would catch together this season. However, it wouldn't be my last baseball game visited on the year, as that would come just 3 weeks later when my friends and I took a bachelor's trip to the Great Smoky Mountains, and we took some time to visit the Tennessee Smokies, taking on the Rocket City Trash Pandas. This game weirdly had a lot of top prospects that I'm sure my friends had zero appreciation of as non baseball fans. Whether they appreciate it or not, we did get to watch the Travis Shaw show, as he went 3 for 4 with a homer in the first inning. He played alongside James Triantos and Kevin Alcantara, who are also ranked among the top 100 prospects of baseball. Unfortunately, as any good group of dudes do, these are the only 3 pictures I have from the entire weekend, so there isn't much for me to add other than we had a good time. Since it was a minor league game, the tickets were a bit cheaper at $111.62 for the 4 tickets, bringing the total on the year to $1,461.48. However, as many of you know, the tickets themselves are only a portion of the cost. Hotels, concession, parking, gas are all figures that you have to take into account. And with that, I probably spent close to $2,500 on games alone this season, not counting the other touristy stuff we did on the trip. All in all, it was a successful year of tripping with my wife. One that I wouldn't trade for the world, especially considering our current situation of buying a home and a child on the way in April that will cut into our ability to travel. If you made it this far into the video, let me know what your favorite trip of 2024 was in the comment section, baseball related or not. And as always, have a wonderful day.